What's up, everybody? It's Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and we're here once again with some UFC DFS picks and lineup advice, both FanDuel and DraftKings for UFC Fight Night in Las Vegas between Lewis and Oleinik. In this video, we're going to use the tools at OccupyFantasy.com to talk about some projected ownership, some top plays, fights you want to target, fights you want to avoid, and just some general lineup advice to help you build for both FanDuel and DraftKings. Before we get started, go ahead and click that subscribe button below. That way you get access to all of our latest videos as soon as they are released. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, hit up the comments section below the video. We'll be sure to get back to you before the slate starts on Saturday afternoon. Speaking of Saturday, we're going live on Twitch, twitch.tv/OccupyFantasy, I believe at 4:30. Be sure to follow us there to be notified the exact time. And we're going to take your questions live. As we always do, 30-minute session on Twitch. Reminder that Twitch subscribers do get access to our Discord channel where our members are talking with each other about all sorts of daily fantasy sports. All right, so as you see on the screen here, Lewis and Oleinik, the main event for Saturday's card. Let's pull up the MMA Occupy model on OccupyFantasy.com. Ranks every single fighter on the slate, FanDuel and DraftKings. Reminder that fighters are ranked by our proprietary metric called OF Index, Occupy Fantasy Index. Every single video, the way I like to explain it, OF Index combines two things truly. A fighter's likelihood to win combined with if he or she wins, what is the likelihood that they end up in the optimal lineup for the slate. So that's the way to think about it. Let's start, as we normally do, with the main event. Alexei Oleinik, Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis is a minus 200 favorite. Let's get this in here. Versus Alexei Oleinik. And so we're back to 5 rounds. After last slate last weekend, there was just a 3-round main event. We are back to the typical 5-round main event, so let's keep that in mind. As 5-round fights have more chances for scoring, as every other fight on the slate is 3 rounds, so that makes sense. But in addition to the 5 rounds, we're also back to the advantageous pricing for main events. If you recall, the last 5-round main event we had, Whitaker versus Till, it was basically a coin flip. Both fighters on DraftKings are right around that 8K mark. But now we're back with Lewis being a significant favorite. He is 8,700 on DraftKings. The underdog Oleinik is 7,500, which means that generally the main event winner is in the optimal lineup. Now, it's not guaranteed and it's not all the time, but generally speaking, that's the case. And with Oleinik being an underdog at 7,500, the odds of him, if he wins, very, very high of being in the optimal lineup. And we could take advantage of the pricing there on DraftKings with that discrepancy. Remember, DraftKings prices their fighters based on likelihood to win, based on the money line, not necessarily their upside in the in the event of a victory. Two very different things. Now, FanDuel, they're back to their usual tricks where the main event favorite is $20 or $21 and the underdog is priced above $15 to capture that upside. So FanDuel actually does a much better job there. Now, this is a rare occasion where the underdog, especially in the main event, is ranked higher in our Occupy model than the favorite. Alexei Oleinik, OF Index of 135. That's pretty good. Anything over 90 is considered elite. And then we have Derek Lewis a few spots below him at 100, which is not a bad number either. Now, the reason for this is, looking at the back end and look at the metrics that go into it, Oleinik has more paths to victory than Derek Lewis. Now, Derek Lewis, we see over here a 52% knockout chance. Very likely, if he wins this fight, it comes by early knockout. Where Oleinik, on the other hand, can get takedowns, submissions. Now, his cardio and his durability in the later rounds can certainly be questioned, but I think that is the case for both of these fighters. Oleinik, in his fights in the UFC, he either gets a first-round finish or he's getting 3+ takedowns. Now, if we get 5 rounds of that, if we get an early submission, Oleinik's looking pretty good from a FanDuel and DraftKings perspective. And the other thing that I really like about this, at least from the underdog, and if you're Derek Lewis, you probably don't like to see this, but a 65-cent move in the betting markets for Alexei Oleinik's money line. Now, he opened as a plus 225 underdog that has plummeted down to plus 160. We love seeing that, and that also helps him rank higher than Lewis in the model. Now, again, we're not saying Oleinik is more likely to win this fight than Derek Lewis. Maybe he is, but we're saying that in the event that these fighters win, Oleinik is more likely to end up in the optimal lineup than Derek Lewis. Now, Lewis could very easily, if you look at his DraftKings game logs, he is really low volume, and even if he gets a second or third round knockout, he may not get enough significant strikes in order to be in the optimal lineup at 8,700. Something to consider. Now, if he gets that first or second round KO, yeah, it's probably going to happen. But this Oleinik phenomenon of being the underdog, being ranked over the favorite, that's one of 4 fights on this slate in our model where the underdog ranks higher. We'll get back to this fight in a second here, but this Al-Khazi fight against Erwin Rivera, he ranks much higher than Rivera. We have Tim Means, who ranks a little bit higher than Staropoli. See down here in the bottom half of the model. And then we also have Andrew Sanchez, who ranks a little bit higher than Wellington Turman. So really interesting scenarios here. We're always looking for underdogs, high upside underdogs to fill out our lineups. Whether it's in low risk or high risk, you're going to need those cheaper fighters to fill out your lineup. And in high risk especially, you want those underdog upsets to help you get unique. And it looks like there are 4 fights that can help us do this if we just purely #trust the model. Now, this Al-Khazi fight is interesting because Rivera has just one UFC fight under his belt. It was kind of a short notice fight. If you remember, he was like a plus 600 underdog. Got beat pretty handily, but now he's facing a newcomer in Al-Khazi, who is making his UFC debut, and the level of competition he has faced, pretty questionable at best. But again, just looking at Al-Khazi's charting, looking at his comparables, his type of metrics, more takedown friendly than Rivera. So in the event that Al-Khazi wins, especially at 7,300 on DraftKings and $12 on FanDuel, if he wins, very likely to be in the optimal lineup. Whereas Rivera at $8,918, probably going to need a knockout to get that done. Not saying that's not out of the question. If we just scroll down a little bit here so you can see it, 31% chance of a finish. That's pretty high. But again, he has 8,900 ranked in the bottom half of the model. Generally not a good sign. I will say, however, the sample sizes for both of these fighters are very small. So there is a wide range of outcomes. If you're playing the drinking game where I say range of outcomes, go ahead and take your drink. But yeah, this fight, a wide variety of things can happen due to the lack of tape on Al-Khazi and just the lack of data overall for both fighters in this fight. We talked about line moves for Alexei Oleinik. If we sort the model by money line moves, we see some pretty significant moves in the betting markets. And again, we're recording this Friday night. We generally see even more moves Saturday afternoon when limits are raised at sports books. But we see Youssef Zalal, who has been an Occupy Model favorite in his 2 UFC fights, minus 160 move. He opened as a minus 320 favorite, incorrectly, I would say, and it looks like the betting markets agree with me. And he's now up to minus 480, fighting against Peter Barrett, who is frankly not very good. And Kevin Holland, who was supposed to fight last week, if you remember. Fight got canceled mid-slate after his opponent passed out walking to the ring. He fights newcomer Joaquin Buckley. And Holland just immediately got bet up as well. He was a minus 380 favorite. He's now up to minus 500. No surprise that both of these guys are near the top of the pricing tiers. Very likely to win. And in Holland's case especially, very high finish percent, 57%. In fact, the highest on the slate. Just real quick, Zalal, he has a lot of upside in his takedowns, but if you look at his DraftKings game logs, not very impressive as far as his DraftKings scoring goes. But I will say, this is the easiest opponent he will have faced in the UFC. Expect a much higher floor and ceiling, and the Occupy model picks up on that with his slate-leading 165 OF index. So just keep that in mind. All right, in addition to Zalal, Holland, and Oleinik, we see Justin James with a 63-cent move. My guy opened as a plus 175 underdog. He's now down to plus 112. If you've been around or watching these videos, or you've been playing UFC since it became a little bit more popular, Justin James was a short notice fighter against Camacho, who was like a 70% owned favorite in DFS, and Justin James went in and KO'd him in the very early seconds of the fight. I imagine the recency bias is in a lot of people's minds here as James gets that big money line move. Alex Munoz also making his UFC debut. A little bit of a common theme here. Him and Al-Khazi both have seen money line moves in their favor. The veteran Chris Weidman, 31-cent move, pretty significant when he opened as a minus 110 favorite, now up to minus 141. Pretty significant move. And then Beneil Dariush, a 30-cent move for him, minus 160 to minus 190. Pretty good indications, especially for a lot of these guys who rank high in the model, to see that the betting market backs that up. Always inspires more confidence. Let's look at projected ownership. We'll start with DraftKings. No surprise, Kevin Holland is the biggest favorite on the slate, expected to be above 50% owned. Reminder that we do get our DraftKings ownership from MMA DFS.com. They put up information sheets and they project ownership. Go check them out. And then a slew of fighters in that 35 to 40% range. Tim Means, Oleinik, Justin James, Derek Lewis, Zalal, Dariush. And what we see here, remember, if you're playing high-risk contests on DraftKings, if you're playing the big GPPs, which normally we don't advise you doing, you'll need a maximum of 3 of these high-owned fighters in your lineup. And that's with leaving salary on the table. Remember, optimal approach here is leaving at least $1,000 left over. So if the 50K salary cap on DraftKings, don't use more than 49K. And then if you're playing smaller contests, 500 players or less, satellites, leagues, smaller GPPs, you can have up to 4 high-owned fighters in your lineup. And high-owned we classify as 35% or higher, so this upper group here. Now, on FanDuel, you don't have to worry about ownership as much. Really, all you have to do is get different with your MVP spot. Because as we know, the main event favorite, Derek Lewis, is going to be very popular. Kevin Holland, we know, is going to be very popular. Because if we sort by KO percentage in the model, we see those 2 guys at the top. Kevin Holland, 57%. Derek Lewis, 52%. Generally, that's a really good indicator of MVP ownership over on FanDuel. So now you can kind of match the field, and if you like Holland or Lewis, go with those guys in your MVP spots. But normally what we like doing is going with lesser owned MVPs, less than 10%, get leverage. That allows us to get 3 high-owned fighters in our flex spots and not have to worry about duplication with the rest of the field. So let's say you go with, let's say, Beneil Dariush, less than 10% MVP. You can get 3 of these high-owned fighters in your flex spots, and no one else is going to have that lineup. You're good to go. So if we look here, we do have, so Kevin Holland, Derek Lewis leads the pack, and then the next tier below that is Dariush, Zalal. Let's not forget Hakparast here, Nasrat, Darren Stewart, Oleinik. I like Oleinik a lot as the MVP. Going to be less than 10% owned in the MVP spot, but again, very high chance he gets a round 1 or 2 submission. And that would be great for the MVP spot, as most people are going to play his opponent, Derek Lewis. And let's not forget, if you go even deeper down the barrel, Erwin Rivera, Staropoli. So I hope this helps. I hope this has been insightful for you to help you think about this slate, fights to target, who the betting market's like, who the Occupy model likes, who has upside in the event that they win, lineup construction techniques for FanDuel and DraftKings. And be sure to continue to monitor the Occupy model. OccupyFantasy.com, members access only. Click the Occupy model link at the top. This will continue to be updated as betting odds change, as anything else changes. It'll update throughout the day tomorrow, Saturday. And again, join us on Twitch, twitch.tv/OccupyFantasy. That link is in the description below. And ask us questions live tomorrow on how to build your lineups. We'll have a much better idea. I still haven't built my lineups yet. Normally I build my lineup Saturday morning. That way, by the time the Twitch rolls around, I have a great idea of how lineups are being built and can answer your questions more precisely. All right, do us a favor, click that subscribe button below before we get out of here. That way you have access to all of our latest videos. The second we publish them, you'll get notified. And give us a thumbs up if you like the video. And any questions you have, comments, concerns, hit us up below in the comments. We'll get back to you. All right, for Brian Jester, OccupyFantasy.com. Appreciate you listening. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.